fast really quick, and then we'll go through a poem together, and then you'll do it independently. So first, elements of poetry. Most of the time, you're going to see some type of figurative language. I have a couple examples: simile, metaphor, personification, oxymoron, idiom. You'll see imagery. This is just the poet describing things in a lot of detail using your sight, sound, taste, touch, and smell senses. So it'll really describe the smell of the cake baking, trying to help you imagine that. You're also going to see sound devices like alliteration, rhythm, and rhyme scheme. Graphic elements. So think about where the different punctuation is, the different size lines. Maybe one line has one word on it and the next line has 6 words on it. You're also going to see different structures. So think about small stanzas, big stanzas, 4 stanzas that are all the exact same. Maybe you have one super short stanza and one really long stanza. You might see patterns, and sometimes the length is important to what the poet is trying to say. On a separate piece of paper, you're going to create a notes page. So look at the table I have. You're going to create a little table like that. On the left side, TSP-FASTT. On the right side, you'll just write down what it is you're looking for. You're going to write down what you're looking for. So T is for title. Before reading, analyze the title. What prediction can you make about the poem? Is it a literal title? Is it a metaphorical title? What is the poet saying right off the bat? S is for speaker. Who's the speaker in the poem? Is it stated, or do you have to make an inference? So does the poem tell you that it's a boy, or do you have to try to figure that out? P is for paraphrase. Paraphrase the poem 2 to 3 sentences in your own words. So what is the poem about? The poem we're going to go over today is a really short poem, so we only use 1 sentence for that paraphrase. F is figurative language. So what figurative language did you notice? How does it impact the meaning of the poem? Those of you that are in my class, remember inside the poem you can just circle, underline, highlight, whatever you want to do, the figurative language, and then mark what it is. So simile, metaphor, whatever you see. A is attitude. What's the overall attitude of the poem? Happy, sad, funny, scary, optimistic, depressed. What do you see there? S is for shift. Is there a shift in the attitude of the poem? If so, where? So does that attitude change? T, the second T, is theme. So what's the overall theme? What does the poet want you to learn? What lesson has the poet learned? What lesson did the speaker learn? What did you learn on your own? And the last T is title again. So you're going to revisit the title and think about a different title that you could give it. So we're going to go through this before looking at the actual poem. Remember, you need to look at the title and make your prediction. So our title is The Rose That Grew from Concrete, and this poem is by Tupac. So think about what that could mean. I said I think the poem is going to be about a rose. Before I started working on this for y'all, I had never read this poem. So, literal, actual rose was my first thought. Now we're going to read through the poem. The Rose That Grew from Concrete by Tupac Shakur. Did you hear about the rose that grew from a crack in the concrete? Proving nature's law is wrong, it learned to walk without having feet. Funny it seems, but by keeping its dreams, it learned to breathe fresh air. Long live the rose that grew from concrete when no one else ever cared. So next thing we're going to look at is the speaker. So who is speaking here? We don't have anything specific telling us, so we have to make an inference. The speaker is someone who sees beauty in the struggle. He sees that people struggled and came out better for that. And that's good. Next thing is paraphrasing. Like I said, this is short. 1 sentence will be a sufficient paraphrase for this. Remember, your paraphrase should be in your own words. So the paraphrase I wrote, the speaker's telling the story of a metaphorical rose that grows and thrives in spite of its situation. I called it a metaphorical rose because The rose is representative of Tupac. He grew up in a really rough area. He had every reason to not do anything significant with his life. He was such a famous and profound artist because most of his music came from poems that he wrote while he was growing up. He had a whole book of poems before he really got his rap career started. Figurative language. So we're gonna go through the different pieces of figurative language. They'll pop up one at a time. First thing I marked is the rose. It's a metaphor. So Tupac is the rose. Next thing is concrete. Concrete is the metaphor for just life in general. Think about when you're walking and you see concrete. You're walking on the sidewalk and there is a flower growing between the pieces of concrete. That's what he's thinking about. The concrete is his life and his situation and the area he lived in, and he is the rose who's blooming out of that. Next thing I marked is learn to walk. We are talking about a rose. Roses cannot walk. They don't have legs. So we're giving those human qualities to a non-human thing. Keeping its dreams, that's another personification. Once again, it's a rose. It doesn't dream. And then I have rose as another metaphor and concrete as another metaphor. Attitude. Your attitude is the overall mood or tone of the poem. How does the author feel? How does the speaker feel? How do you feel after reading it? I've said the attitude is determined. He was determined to be something, to do something better with his life. Shift. So does that attitude change? There's a minor shift between lines 2 and 3. The poem goes from questioning, so he opens with a question, did you hear about the rose that grew from a crack in the concrete? To determined. That's where he starts telling the story about how the rose proved nature wrong. Tupac proved his whole community wrong. Theme. So remember, that's the lesson. It's your lesson, it's his lesson, it's the speaker's lesson. The theme is don't count someone out based on their circumstances. Think about this as it applies to your life. Maybe your parents didn't go to college or didn't even finish high school. You can be better than that. You can do something better. Just because you grew up in a situation without that extra education doesn't mean you have to live your life like that. And the last thing is the title. So I'm thinking about what I would name the poem or another title that I could use. So at the very top, the new title would be Overcoming. He is overcoming the struggle that comes with growing up in the area that he's from. All right, guys, that's the end. You need to work on the independent practice. In the Google form, you have another poem, and you're going to go through the steps of TSP-FASTT. You also need to do some figurative language IXL. If you haven't already, make sure you watch the figurative language YouTube video. It's just a really quick review.